You're nothing but a crazy old woman who's lost her mind. My son-in-law's lawyer shouted at me across the custody courtroom. Your Honor, this delusional 69-year-old has filled my client's wife with lies about some imaginary fortune and destroyed their marriage. I sat there watching my son-in-law Lopez nod along smugly as his attorney painted me as some bitter old woman. The lawyer paced like a predator, his voice getting louder. She's a dangerous influence on Angel, her daughter, manipulating her with fantasies about wealth that doesn't exist. The packed courtroom murmured in agreement. Everyone believed I was just a delusional old lady. Lopez sat there in his expensive suit, playing the victim perfectly. Then Judge Patricia Coleman walked in. The moment our eyes met, her face drained of all color. Her hand gripped the doorframe so tightly her knuckles went white. She stared at me like she had seen a ghost, and for several long seconds, the entire courtroom held its breath. Then she whispered something I could barely hear. It can't be. The bailiff asked if she was all right, but Judge Coleman just stood there, frozen. She kept staring at me with shock and recognition. Lopez's lawyer cleared his throat impatiently, but the judge couldn't move. She knew something. Something that was about to turn Lopez's world upside down. Hit that subscribe button to know why the judge was speechless. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who had no idea what they were dealing with? Let me know in the comments. But before I tell you what Judge Coleman knew that destroyed Lopez's case, I need to take you back to where this nightmare began. My name is Mrs. Eduardo Rojas. 47 years, I was a devoted wife and mother. I raised Angel while Eduardo worked his construction job, and I became a master at making every penny count. I clipped coupons religiously, shopped sales, and could stretch $1 further than anyone I knew. We lived modestly in our little house on Maple Street, the same house I had called home since 1976. I was the perfect wife by 1950s standards, even though we were living in modern times. I cooked Eduardo's favorite meals, kept the house spotless, volunteered at Angel's school, and never questioned the way things were. Eduardo handled all the finances because, as he always said, he didn't want me to worry my pretty little head about money matters. I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband, the father of my child, and I believed he had our family's best interests at heart. Every month, Eduardo would come home with his construction paycheck, and I would hand him my carefully organized envelope of grocery store coupons I spent hours clipping. He would pat my head like I was a child and tell me how proud he was of me for being so thrifty. I thought I was being a good wife, helping our family save money wherever possible. We never went on vacations. Eduardo said we couldn't afford them. I drove the same beat-up car for 15 years because he said a new one wasn't in the budget. When Angel wanted to take piano lessons, I had to have bake sales and work extra hours cleaning houses just to pay for them. I accepted all of this because I believed we were just a working-class family doing the best we could. Eduardo never talked about investments, savings accounts, or financial planning. If I ever asked about our retirement or what would happen if something happened to him, he would brush me off with a wave of his hand. "Don't you worry about that, Claudia," he would say. "I've got everything under control. You just focus on taking care of the house and Angel." I lived this way for nearly 5 decades, never questioning, never demanding to see bank statements or financial documents. I was completely in the dark about our true financial situation, and Eduardo seemed to prefer it that way. When he passed away 2 years ago from a heart attack, I was devastated not just by grief, but by fear. I genuinely thought I would be scraping by on Social Security, maybe having to sell the house just to survive. I had no idea what Eduardo had left behind, if anything. The funeral expenses alone terrified me. That's when Angel and her husband Lopez stepped in. They were so helpful, so caring, offering to take care of everything for me during my time of grief. Lopez handled all the funeral arrangements, dealt with Eduardo's employer about any final payments, and promised to help me navigate whatever financial mess Eduardo might have left behind. I was so grateful to have a family who cared. Angel would come over every day, bringing groceries and helping me sort through Eduardo's things. Lopez would sit with me and explain what he called widow's benefits and how he would make sure I got everything I was entitled to. They seemed genuinely concerned about my well-being, and I felt blessed to have such a loving daughter and son-in-law during the darkest time of my life. For months, they took care of everything while I grieved. And I let them, because I trusted them completely, just like I had trusted Eduardo. I had no idea that this trust was about to become the biggest mistake of my life. 6 months ago, everything changed. Angel and Lopez started pushing me to move to Sunset Manor, this retirement community across town. "Mom, you're getting older," Angel would say with fake concern. "This house is too big for you. It's so expensive to maintain." When I said no, they got aggressive. Lopez started showing up with real estate agents, telling them I was ready to sell. I would come home from grocery shopping to find strangers walking through my living room, measuring my kitchen. Angel started packing boxes of my belongings without asking, wrapping up my china and photo albums like I was already gone. Then they brought lawyers to my house. These intimidating men in expensive suits spread papers across my kitchen table, telling me I needed to sign documents transferring the house to them for my own protection. When I refused, Lopez's mask came off completely. "Listen, old lady, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. You can sign these papers and move to Sunset Manor, or we can get doctors to say you're losing your mind." Angel stood right there and nodded along. My own daughter was threatening me in my own home. They played the guilt card hard. "You're being selfish, Mom," Angel said, rubbing her pregnant belly. "I'm having a baby, and we need the space more than you do. You're just one old woman in this big house." Lopez got nastier. "You should be grateful we're willing to take care of you at all. Most families would just dump you in the cheapest nursing home." But I refused to sign those papers. Something inside me knew that if I gave up my house, I would lose the last piece of independence I had left. Hit that subscribe button, because what I discovered next will blow your mind completely. Have you ever had a family try to manipulate you into something you didn't want to do? Let me know in the comments. But what Lopez and Angel didn't know was that their greed was about to backfire spectacularly. "You're nothing but a crazy old woman who's lost her mind," Lopez's lawyer shouted at me. "This delusional 69-year-old has filled my client's wife with lies about some imaginary fortune." I sat there watching Lopez nod smugly as his attorney painted me as a bitter old woman. "She's manipulating Angel with fantasies about wealth that doesn't exist." Everyone believed I was just a delusional old lady. Lopez played the victim perfectly in his expensive suit. Then Judge Patricia Coleman walked in. The moment our eyes met, her face drained of color. Her hand gripped the doorframe, knuckles white. She stared at me like she'd seen a ghost. "It can't be," she whispered. The bailiff asked if she was all right, but Judge Coleman stood frozen, staring at me with shock and recognition. Lopez's lawyer cleared his throat impatiently, but she couldn't move. She knew something that was about to destroy Lopez completely. Hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who had no idea what they were dealing with? Let me know in the comments. When Lopez and the movers returned the next morning expecting compliance, I was ready. I had spent the entire night reading through every document in Eduardo's drawer, and for the first time in months, I felt completely calm. I opened the door in my best dress, the navy blue one I had worn to Eduardo's funeral. Lopez stood there with his arms crossed and 3 burly movers behind him, expecting to find a defeated old woman ready to surrender. "Lopez," I said in the sweetest voice I could manage, "before we discuss anything else, I need to inform you that you have 30 days to vacate apartment 4B. His face went completely blank. For a moment he just stared at me like I had spoken in a foreign language. "What are you talking about, you crazy old bat?" he finally sputtered. That's when I handed him the eviction notice I had prepared that morning, signed by me as the building owner. I watched his face change from confusion to shock as he read the letterhead. His hand started shaking as he realized what he was holding. Angel pushed past him and grabbed the paper from his hands. "Mom, what is this? What are you doing?" Her face crumpled as I began to explain everything. The money, the properties, her father's secret empire that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. The conditions Eduardo had set for her inheritance, conditions that required her to treat me with love and respect. Your father knew this day would come, I told her calmly. He protected me from people who would try to take advantage of his trusting wife. Lopez started screaming. You're lying. You're a senile old woman making up stories. Where would you get money like that? I simply reached into my purse and handed him copies of the bank statements. $8.3 million. All in my name, all legally mine. His face turned white as he stared at the numbers, then red with rage. This is fake, he shouted, waving the papers in the air. You made this up. You can't just kick us out of our apartment. Actually, I can, I said, still maintaining my calm tone. I've owned that building for 15 years. You've been paying rent to my property management company, which has been depositing your money into my account every month. You've been funding my life without even knowing it. Angel sank into a chair, staring at me like she was seeing a stranger. Mom, is this real? Are you really worth more money than your husband will make in his entire lifetime? Yes, Angel, I am. Lopez was pacing now, his face getting redder by the minute. This is impossible. If you had all this money, why were you living like a normal person? I finished for him. Because your father-in-law was a smart man who knew that flashing wealth attracts the wrong kind of attention. He was right, wasn't he? The movers stood there awkwardly, unsure whether they should leave or stay. Lopez waved them away angrily, too humiliated to let them witness his complete meltdown. You can't do this to us, he screamed. Angel is pregnant. We have nowhere else to go. You should have thought of that before you tried to steal my house, I replied. 30 days, Lopez. That's more than you deserve. Angel had to choose. Lopez was furious, screaming that I manipulated Eduardo, that the will was fake, that I was stealing his future. She's lying to you, Angel. She's a crazy old woman who forged those documents. But Angel looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in months. She saw her mother, not the burden they had painted me as. Mom, she whispered, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Lopez grabbed her arm. Choose right now, Angel. It's me and our baby, or this bitter old woman. If you choose her over our financial future, I'm done with you. I'll leave you and take the baby. Angel stared at him in shock. You're threatening to leave me if I don't help you steal from my own mother? That money belongs to us. We're young. She's going to die soon anyway. That was the moment Angel truly saw who she married. She pulled away from him and walked over to me. Mom, can I come home? I opened my arms and held my daughter. Lopez stood there in disbelief. Angel moved back into my house that same day. But Lopez wasn't finished. He filed for custody of their unborn child, claiming Angel was mentally unstable and under my undue influence. He hired the most expensive lawyer in town, determined to take Serenity. That's what they had decided to name the baby. His lawyer filed papers claiming Angel was suffering from pregnancy-induced mental instability, that I was taking advantage of her vulnerable state, and that the baby would be in danger with us. Hit that subscribe button because the courtroom showdown coming next will leave you stunned. Have you ever had to choose between family and a manipulative partner? Let me know in the comments. Lopez had no idea his greed was about to lead him into the biggest mistake of his life. The custody hearing was brutal. Lopez's lawyer painted me as a manipulative old woman who had turned daughter against husband for money. What we have here is elder manipulation, the lawyer declared. Mrs. Rojas has filled her pregnant daughter's head with fantasies about imaginary wealth, destroying a loving marriage. They claimed I was mentally unfit, that my sudden wealth proved I was delusional. They brought in a psychiatrist who testified that elderly people often develop elaborate fantasies about money to feel important and maintain control. Lopez took the stand and lied through his teeth. With crocodile tears in his eyes, he testified that I had threatened him, that I was dangerous to be around his child. Your Honor, I'm terrified for my unborn daughter's safety. This woman has completely brainwashed my wife against me. The lawyer presented evidence of my mental decline. The fact that I had lived modestly for decades, then suddenly claimed to be wealthy. He brought in neighbors who testified that I had always seemed like a normal old lady who clipped coupons. If Mrs. Rojas really had $8 million, why would she live like a pauper for 47 years? Because the money doesn't exist. Everyone in that courtroom believed their version of events. I was just some bitter old woman who had destroyed a marriage out of spite, who had invented lies about wealth to control my daughter. The spectators whispered among themselves, shaking their heads at the crazy old lady who thought she was rich. Even my own lawyer seemed nervous, avoiding eye contact like he was starting to doubt my story. For over an hour, I listened to them tear apart my character and mental state. They made me sound like a master manipulator who had planned the destruction of my daughter's marriage. But then Judge Patricia Coleman finally composed herself and took her seat. She had been frozen in that doorway, staring at me with recognition. And I knew everything was about to change. Judge Coleman's voice shook slightly as she called the court to order. She kept glancing at me, and I could see memories flooding back. Finally, she spoke. "Before we proceed, I need to address something. Mrs. Rojas, did you work at the family courthouse on 5th Street between 1985 and 2000? The entire room went silent. Lopez's lawyer jumped up. "Objection, Your Honor. What does this have to do with the case?" Judge Coleman raised her hand. "Because 34 years ago, when I was Patricia Johnson, a single mother fighting for custody of my own children, there was a court clerk who stayed late every night to help me understand legal documents." My heart started pounding. This clerk showed me how to file the right papers, how to present my evidence. She worked weekends, stayed past closing time, used her own money to make copies for families who couldn't afford them. That woman saved my children from an abusive father who had hired expensive lawyers to prove I was unfit. The courtroom was buzzing. People turned to stare at me. "Your Honor," I said quietly, "you had twin boys, Michael and James. You were 23. Working 2 jobs, and your ex-husband's attorney was trying to prove you were unfit because you worked nights at a diner." Judge Coleman nodded, tears in her eyes. "That woman saved my family. And if this is the same woman, then I know her character better than anyone else in this courtroom." Lopez was staring in complete confusion. His lawyer was frantically shuffling papers, trying to understand what was happening. But Judge Coleman wasn't finished. And what she said next destroyed Lopez's case completely. The courtroom erupted. Lopez's face went white as Judge Coleman continued speaking with growing conviction. "Mrs. Rojas didn't just help me. She helped dozens of women navigate the system when they had nowhere else to turn. She used her position to ensure families stayed together and children stayed safe. She never asked for anything in return, never sought recognition. If this is the same woman, then I know her character better than anyone in this room." Lopez's lawyer was frantically objecting, jumping up and down like a puppet. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. I demand a mistrial. This has nothing to do with—" "Sit down," Judge Coleman commanded. "This has everything to do with character, which is exactly what this case is about." She turned to address the entire courtroom. "I've sat here for over an hour listening to testimony about Mrs. Rojas's supposed mental instability and manipulative behavior. But I've seen this woman's character firsthand. She spent 15 years of her life helping families in crisis, staying late, working weekends, never asking for recognition or reward." Lopez was sinking into his chair, realizing his perfect plan was crumbling around him. Judge Coleman's voice grew firm and authoritative. "Based on the testimony I've heard today, and my personal knowledge of Mrs. Ross's character, I'm making my ruling. Mr. Lopez, not only do you lose all parental rights to the unborn child, but you are hereby ordered to pay substantial damages for emotional distress to both Mrs. Rojas and Angel." The courtroom gasped, but she wasn't finished. "Furthermore, I'm awarding Angel full custody with a permanent restraining order against you. You are not to contact her, approach her, or come within 500 feet of her or Mrs. Rojas." Lopez exploded. He jumped up screaming, "This is rigged. She's lying. That old woman brainwashed you too." Security immediately moved in as Lopez continued his meltdown. "I'll appeal this. I'll sue everyone. You can't do this to me." As Lopez was escorted out in handcuffs, still screaming threats, Judge Coleman quietly said, "Mrs. Rojas, you saved my family once. Today, I return the favor." And that's how a 69-year-old woman, who spent decades helping others, discovered that sometimes the universe has a way of bringing things full circle. The man who called me a crazy old woman and tried to steal my home was now facing criminal charges, while my granddaughter Serenity would grow up safe and protected. Hit that subscribe button because this story proves that kindness always comes back to you when you need it most. Have you ever had someone from your past show up at exactly the right moment to help you? Share your story in the comments below. Today, Angel and I are rebuilding our relationship, and little Serenity is the light of both our lives.